Welcome to the IREL podcast. Are you sick and tired of real estate gurus pitching their next pre-construction deal, only to find out years later they were completely wrong? Worried the next overseas conference you spend thousands to attend will only be used to sell overpriced lots in deserted developments? Join thousands of other international real estate seekers who are looking for their place in paradise without the sales pitch. Straight from your host, Taylor White.
Hey, podcast listener. Welcome to the Overseas Property Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Taylor White. We are about to hear from a home exchange insider about the best strategies and tactics to exchange your house for someone else's. I have teamed up with a great resource that has over 50,000 homes in 150 countries, and they have extended a completely free 14-day trial just for checking them out for listeners of this episode. On top of that, they guarantee a home exchange in your first year. Head on over to irelpodcast.com/exchange for more details. I'm really excited to sit down and speak with a home exchange insider in AK Turner, who has completed exchanges with her house in Idaho, with another in Mexico, the Jersey Shore, and has one upcoming in Australia. AK and I will cover a lot of ground, including what exactly a home exchange is, and unfortunately, it's not always as seamless and easy as the name suggests. Which sites she and her family find the most traction, and best use tips for these. Reveals how a wife, mother, and a small business owner can put all the pieces together, and encourages anyone wanting to try new locations to give it a try, and much more. Instead of telling you more, let's join AK from Idaho. AK, what's going on? It's Taylor White. I'm excited to have you on the podcast today, straight from the AK Turner headquarters, so we can get to know you personally. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Of course.
I am AK Turner. I'm a writer in Idaho, and I've written a series of books on humor, and recently travel has been incorporated much more into my writing. And my husband is a small business owner, and we've just geared our lives recently towards traveling more. But we're both, self-employed, independent business owners here in Idaho, and we like to get out and see the world as much as we can.
I love that. And AK, we're going to jump right into it and talk about several strategies you and your family have used to home exchange in Mexico, the Jersey Shore, and I know that you might have an upcoming trip to Australia. But first off, AK, what is a home exchange?
Well, a home exchange really, it's a way of traveling to save some money and open up the world to places that you otherwise might not consider. A lot of people want to travel and want to maybe travel for longer than a vacation, especially if you're traveling to the other side of the world. It takes so long to get there. You want to really put down some roots and enjoy where you're going. So a home exchange is a way of offering up your home to someone so that they reciprocate. So when you travel really far, you have a place where you can really set up shop, and you can avoid the expense of a hotel room. You can have a kitchen. You have all the amenities of home without having to, you pay for them by offering up your own home. So it really opens up the possibilities of how you can travel, when you can travel, for how long, and where you can go.
I love it, AK. I'm excited. And we have homeexchange.com as a partner of our show. And I know there's several other sites. A few that come to mind might be Love Home Swap. There's Intervac Home Exchange, and I know many others. But what are some of the sites that you personally use?
I am on homeexchange.com, really like that one, and also on vrbo.com, which stands for Vacation Rental by Owner, which is another, a lot of these sites, they're wonderful. They're wonderful tools to find out the different places that you might go where people are willing to go. And sometimes you use them and make connections that maybe pan out down the line, not initially. But Home Exchange and VRBO are probably the two that we use the most.
I love that. So AK, I know that VRBO is vacation rentals by owner, so it's not a traditional home exchange site. I was just curious as to your thoughts as to using that versus a traditional home exchange site.
Well, whichever way you go, even if you're putting your home up, as an available rental on Craigslist, let's say you're just putting it up as a regular rental or
Right.
vacation rental by owner or home exchange, whichever way you go, you have to be open to different arrangements, complex arrangements. A lot of people on homeexchange.com have more than one home and they do what are called triangle exchanges. So I think all of those sites are beneficial. It's really good to get out and learn as much as you can from each of them because a home exchange is not always, I'll give you mine and you give me yours. It's not always that simple. So it's good to, even if you're not, maybe the VRBO isn't going to go anywhere, it's good to get on there and see what's available because you might make connections that lead to a triangle exchange or a more complex arrangement.
AK, I want it as simple as I exchange my house for your house. Why can't it be that simple?
Sometimes it is, but sometimes you might find, okay, so I live in Idaho. We don't ski or anything, so we're not really big on being around here in the wintertime. Other people are really keen on that. That sounds great to them. Maybe they want to come here and ski in the wintertime, but maybe they live in Canada and we don't really want to go to Canada in the wintertime either. But let's say they have a second home in France and hey, that sounds great. So maybe they come to Idaho, we go to their home in France and you work it that way. It can get even more complex. When we're going to Australia, we have a home in Queensland for 4 weeks that was given to us by some friends who have a home in France that the Australian people stayed at, but they don't want to go, they don't want to do just a regular swap. So our friends had this credit for this home in Australia and they had no plans to go to Australia. In return, our relatives with a home in Mexico are going to give them some time there. Does that make sense? It can get complicated.
I love it. I had to put my thinking cap on for a second, AK, but I just wanted to bring something out that sounds like that's a triangle exchange. So sometimes it's not as simple as, hey, I'm off for the first week in June. Someone else is off the first week of June. Let's just swap. Sometimes you have to think outside the box, right?
Exactly. And so approaching people who have more than one home, I don't have more than one home, but can really open up the doors. And you have to open your mind and really be open to different things like that, different possibilities. Otherwise, you can kind of limit yourself to, okay, well, I guess we're going the first week of June, but maybe that's not what you're really looking for.
So then something I wanted to hit on is, and I know that you don't own these sites, but is cost. So do you pay to list or do you pay once an exchange is done? What happens as far as the money is concerned?
So, in terms of listing your home on the sites, most of them, you have a trial period. Some do 30 days or 90-day trial period. And then if you like it and you want to stay listed on the site, you pay a yearly fee. A lot of the time, like homeexchange.com, if you don't have a successful home exchange after that first year is up, they don't charge you the renewal. So you get another, they want it to be worth it for you. I mean, they want you to get the value out of being on the site, but they all have different rates and different fine print, and you have to look at it and read it and understand it. But sites like VRBO and homeexchange.com, these are legitimate sites. They're not there to scam you. They really want it to work for you because they know if it does work for you, you're going to continue using it and you're going to tell other people about it.
So, AK, I know that you've personally done at least a couple of these, and I can imagine that there's some things that you can't do without. And I know for me, I know this is basic, but I can't do without internet. So I was wondering if you could maybe talk more about how you can deal with things that you can't do without.
I think it's really important when you first start to consider something like this is to identify what is non-negotiable for you. For my family, it's the same way. We have to have internet because both my husband and I work, from our laptops, which is great because we can do it from anywhere anywhere that has internet, though. So that's really key. We're also a family of 4. We have 2 small children, so 2-bedroom. We cannot do a 1-bedroom. It's got to have at least 2 bedrooms. We can all cram into 1 bathroom if need be. That's easy. But basically, we need 2 bedrooms, a minimum of 2 bedrooms, and we have to have internet. So when you're thinking about this, you need to really identify what it is that you need. For most people, it is internet. A lot of the things that people think they really need, you really don't. And the experience itself is going to make up for a lack of that. Like I've heard people say, oh, I can't go anywhere that doesn't have a movie theater. You know, actually you can. And if you're going someplace that doesn't have a movie theater, chances are you're going to be in a really neat, cool place that has a lot of things to experience that are going to make up for that. But identifying those basics, that's a great place to start when you're considering something like this. And in fact, I think you should consider what the basics that you need are before you start narrowing down place.
So, AK, you're going to have your home vacant. You're going to be someplace. Someone's going to be staying in your home. What are some of the things that you do to get your home ready for others?
I use a safety deposit box. So I take some personal items, personal financial items, Social Security cards, that all of that sort of thing, checkbooks,
Right.
and I take them to the safety deposit box. I've been in other homes where people actually have a section of the home that is locked off. So before they leave and they're going to offer their home up, they cram everything that's personal into that, that space, and it's locked up tight, and they don't really worry about it. Another thing that you should do is really declutter. And it's a lot of work before you go, but it's so worth it because you'll feel so good, because before you leave, your home is going to look so gorgeous. You're going to say, wow, why are we leaving? This is such an awesome place. But you really have to declutter as much as possible. And that's as simple as getting some huge storage bins, big, Tupperware bins, and just throwing all your stuff in there. We don't take personal pictures down off the walls, those stay up. But if we have like freestanding frames or things like that, all of those just get put into big bins. Beyond that, and just having the house spick and span as clean as possible, because you can pretty much expect that those people are going to do the same for you. That's just a good courtesy. And everybody reviews everyone else's home, so that's important too. But beyond that, I don't worry too much about things. Really, they're just things. People have said, oh, how could you have someone stay in your house? I'm like, well, this is a really wonderful experience. They're offering up their home too. And so I don't really worry. And I've had such wonderful experiences with the people who have stayed in our home that I don't worry about it too much. But it is a number of hours really cleaning as much as possible, really making the home as low maintenance as possible for the people who are going to stay there, putting away all that clutter, the personal effects, putting things in bins, taking really important documents, to a safety deposit box, or even to a trusted friend or relative, just somewhere off the premises, and having a little faith in the process and the people. Most people who give it a shot, they'll be really glad that they did.
And then, AK, I know it's kind of a small, tight-knit community on a site like homeexchange.com. I know it's big and there's lots of houses there, but people can talk and communicate online. They can see each other's pictures. It's more of a social atmosphere. So I would have to imagine that it's very trustworthy.
It really is. It does cost a couple $100s to do this listing. So people aren't just there, to kind of fool around or scam people. You put a lot of personal information up about, this is me, this is my family, this is what we enjoy to do, activities we enjoy, what we're looking for, where we've traveled. You need to create that trust and almost that friendship if you're going to look at doing something like this. We've had a lot of discussions back and forth that have gone on for months with people where we really feel like we know them and we're friends, and maybe the exchange doesn't end up working out. And we may still then have that friendship. We have a couple people we've struck up friendships with, and the exchange part of it didn't work out, but we are still going to be where they are, and they're like, well, come have a glass of wine with us when you're here, because you do create sort of that camaraderie over time. And those are all good connections. Every time you create a relationship like that, well, maybe the exchange doesn't work out, but maybe it will in 4 years. Maybe the timing will be right and the stars will align and you have that relationship established.
So I know that you said that you have a small family that you travel with, and I was curious to know what you do traveling with kids internationally, like your upcoming trip to Australia or one that you took to Mexico, in terms of passports or paperwork that you might need.
I really wanted to talk about this just because we are a traveling family, always have been, and we've seen it happen so many times where people have a trip planned after they have a baby, usually their first baby, and it doesn't occur to them that a baby needs a passport.
Right.
Or they
birth
don't.
certificate.
Right. Well, if, people say, oh, well, what am I going to do? Have a passport with this little newborn baby's picture on it? Well, yes, that's exactly what you have to do. And in 3 months, they won't look anything like their passport picture anymore, but you still have to get it. So and it takes time to get a passport. Of course, you can pay more to get it expedited, but a birth certificate is not good enough if you're going to travel internationally. You must have that passport. So it's just important to think those things through, because that's really a bummer when your flight leaves in a couple days and you realize that you need documents that might take 2 months to get.
And then as a follow-up for documentation for children, if they're under a certain age, do you need anything else besides a passport that basically says that they're part of your family?
No, you don't. I mean, well, in our experiences and everywhere that we have traveled, a passport is it. Now, when you get a passport for a child I think it's under 16, both parents must be with the child at the passport office with identification. So once a minor has that passport, both parents have already had to stand and swear, I am who I am and I'm the parent. So you had to go through all of those steps. And then the passport is really, really golden from there on out. It's also with children, it's only good for 5 years. So our 4-year-old, for our trip to Australia, I looked and I said, oh, this passport's going to expire by the time that trip comes around. So we went ahead and renewed it. But you have to keep an eye on those things. It's just a silly way to screw up a trip if at the last minute you realize you don't have what you need.
Oh, completely. So then keeping on the kids beat, what might you do in your destination city, let's say Australia, as far as kids are concerned for school or childcare?
Well, let's see. So we've tried a number of different things. Now, coming up in Australia, we'll be there for about 2 months. It will be over the Christmas holidays. So if they were here, they would be missing a few weeks of school anyway for the holidays. We are going to, well, there are a number of things you can do. What I will do now, our kids will be in kindergarten and second grade by the time we go to Australia. I will approach their teachers, tell them what we're doing, and gauge their reaction, first of all. The first time we did a 3-month trip to Mexico, my oldest was in kindergarten, and I was afraid about talking to the teacher, like, she's going to say, no, you can't take your child out of school for 3 months. But most teachers will recognize that the educational value of travel is so much greater, especially if your children are very young. So I'm going to approach the teachers and ask them if they would like to give me the curriculum that my children will be missing while we're gone, and I can keep up with that on my own. But the other thing to do is you can look at local public schools. I know another family who enrolled their children, they're about junior high age, in the Mexican public school system. And lots of people said, oh, you're crazy, you can't do that. Well, they can, and they did, and their children are now fluent, and it was a really wonderful decision for them. We have also used Montessori schools in other countries that are run by Americans and English speaking. So there are a lot of different options. You can get a curriculum from your existing school. You can look online for a homeschool curriculum. You can enroll your child in a K through 12 online program. You can look at Montessori schools, or you can look at the public school system wherever you're going. But there are a lot of options there. And what's really beneficial is to make, with the internet, we can make so many connections now, right? So if you can make connections with schools or parents or expats in your destination location, they can really tell you, oh, well, this is available, this is available. They can point you in the direction of resources that you might not otherwise find on your own.
It seems like to me, if this is going to be something that people are going to do for extended period of time or several times over several years and you have children, then homeschooling might be the best bet. And I was curious if if you're a U.S. citizen and let's say that you're from Idaho and you're doing homeschooling and let's say you go to Australia or else Mexico for a year or 2 years, can you homeschool from a different country?
Sure, absolutely. I don't see why not. Most people who will tell you that you can't do something
Just don't know.
They just don't know it, and they're just really operating out of fear of change. But you can pretty much do anything. And again, if you recognize the educational value of the travel experience itself, and then you keep up with the basic curriculum of what they would be missing, you're really doing your child a service, rather than a disservice. I will say that my friends who enrolled their children in the public school system in Mexico, and everybody told them they were crazy, and it was a wonderful choice, and their children are doing wonderfully. They are now relocating back to the U.S. this summer before their oldest child enters high school, because they want her to have an intact high school experience in the U.S. so as not to jeopardize her chances of getting into college if that's the route she wants to take. Which is not to say that they might not travel and do home exchanges and leave for a month at a time, but they want the basics of her high school experience to be in one school, maybe with small patches of travel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was curious as a follow-up if you guys have ever considered house sitting versus a home exchange and how that might differ in your opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it sounds ideal
Right.
when you're taking care of another home, but not necessarily having to get your home ready and open it to someone else. Now, like I said, we have small children. We're talking ages 4 and 7.
Right.
So most people don't want small children if they have a really nice home that they want taken care of. Now, they would be wrong, of course, because my kids are little angels and don't do any damage. But house sitting, in my experience, I've seen is often geared toward a single person. I know a lot of newly retired people who go and house sit for owners who travel and just want their place occupied for safety or peace of mind or whatever it may be. So we haven't looked into that necessarily, but we'd certainly be open to it if it was the right match.
So I can imagine that traveling is very tough on yourself as well as your kids. How hard is it for you guys to adapt to a new location?
It gets easier the more you do it.
Right.
And we never give our children enough credit. Children are so adaptable. They really are. And I think they're even more adaptable if you don't go down the route of here's your iPad or your video game or whatnot. Because then they look up and they look around and they see that things are different and interesting. And if you can foster that open-mindedness and that curiosity about the world, they'll just dive right in. They really will. And we've traveled with our children since they were born. So they have an excitement about it. And they'll say, when is our next trip? And then we try and explain that plane tickets cost money. They don't really get that part yet. But most of the time, well, we have really easy kids. They're not angels. I was joking when I said that part. But really easy kids, and they're very adaptable. And I think most parents find that their kids are more adaptable than they would have thought.
And then, AK, I know as you're speaking, something else is coming to mind. Most people these days have cars, and I'm curious if it's standard for in a home exchange, if that also includes like a car or a boat, or it kind of all depends.
It all depends. Now, if you're on a site like homeexchange.com, the people will list if they're willing to swap vehicles. If you find people that live on the water, they'll tell you what maybe water toys they have. They'll say, we have 2 kayaks, we have this, we have that, and they'll let you know what's available to you. The car issue can be an issue,
Right.
depending on where you're going and how close you are to amenities. When we did a month on the Jersey Shore, we didn't rent a car. We didn't have a car. We were a block from the beach, so that's enough entertainment for the family, right? And then there were a few little stores around. I had a relative who would visit every now and then. Well, when she would visit, we would swipe her car and go do a big run to a big grocery store to stock up and get what we needed. But we really wanted to skip that expense. In Mexico, we have rented a car for, I think we rented it for the full 3 months we were there from some local expats, some Americans who had a second car, and they loved the idea of giving their vehicle to us, getting a little bit of cash, and just being a one vehicle family themselves in the meantime. So that worked out great. And that's another example of why it's really good to touch base with some locals, some local expats, people who know their community and can introduce you to options like that. I'm really not big on the traditional rent a car from a car rental place.
There's always issues with that, AK. There's always issues. There's always a dent that they didn't see that they're going to charge you. There's always issues.
Man, I just don't want to do it, and especially if you're going someplace for an extended period of time. So we really like to find out if there are bicycles available. That actually can be a big help. And then find out, are the stores within walking distance or biking distance? Or maybe what you do is you say, okay, we're going to rent a car, but only for this one little period of time in the middle of our stay. So then, we'll use that to go do a big run at a grocery store. But personally, I like to get by without it when we can. We needed a vehicle in Mexico to get to the Montessori school and to get into the town where we were. But like I said, we rented one from some local expats. It was a wonderful exchange, and it worked out great for everyone.
So, okay, I would love to ask you one more question and then wrap up the call and then find out the best ways to connect with you. And the last question might be the most important for a lot of people, and that's healthcare. So what do you guys do, especially with kids, do as far as insurance is concerned?
Well, that is a great question. We don't do anything. We don't get any extra insurance policies that we don't have just in the course of normal daily life here in the U.S. When we were in Mexico, we frequented their emergency room a couple times because we have small children, and sometimes that's the way it goes. That's a place where you can get excellent medical care, and your total bill is $22, whereas in the U.S. it would be $2,200.
Right.
So, and because we had traveled there before and we were familiar with the emergency room and the hospital and the healthcare in the town that we visited, we weren't overly concerned about it. You can get extra insurance. In my experience, it's been easier and cheaper to get quality health care outside of the U.S. than when we're here. Is that wrong to have said that? Am I going to get some blowback for that?
No, I think you're absolutely correct. If you're from the States and you go to a place like Mexico or maybe like Nicaragua, as for instance, you feel more comfortable going there without insurance and paying cash if something was to happen. If
Right.
you were from outside the U.S. and travel to the U.S., I think it's more of a concern because, God forbid something happened, it's going to cost a fortune to get it fixed.
Right. Yeah. That's one of those things. I think it's probably a pretty personal decision.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. But we don't add on any extra insurance of any kind when we travel.
So, AK, I loved our call today, and I'd love to wrap it up if we can for some final tips or strategies that you might want to recommend for people listening.
Well, I think The more you can learn about different places in the world, the better. That's a great place to start. You can get on homeexchange.com and look around at what's available without listing your own home, just to get an idea for how it works and what's out there. So that's a great place to start too. VRBO can give you some more ideas on places and what types of homes people are offering. You don't have to have a mansion to do this sort of thing. I mean, we have a modest home, but it's worked out really well. And I think another thing another mistake people tend to make is they think, well, my home's not good enough because we have 2 small children, and so there's toys and things like that. I worried about that early on, and we had 2 different families who stayed here who had small children. To them, it was a huge benefit that we had a toddler bed and a trampoline in the backyard and toys. I mean, that was a plus for them. So there's always another family out there that is a good fit. But getting out on those sites and seeing what's there, and then thinking about what you really need and what you really don't need, is a great place to start making a plan.
Love it, AK. I know that you have written a few great books. You speak at conferences. What are some of the best ways to follow you?
The best way would be at akturner.com. I have a blog there, and I'll be blogging about our trip to Australia, and we're going to travel down from Queensland and eventually down to Tasmania. So I'm going to blog about that along the way. So akturner.com, and then, of course, from there you can find me on all the usual suspects, Twitter and Facebook and Pinterest and Google and whatnot. So I'm out there, but akturner.com is a great place to start.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, and I hope we can do it again sometime soon.
Taylor, thank you for being so awesome. That was great. A lot of fun.
I absolutely love the call with AK today, and I'm a huge fan of the home exchange model for those wanting to keep their own house while discovering new places to enjoy. You can head on over to our site for complete show notes, easy ways to follow and connect with AK, and more information about her great portable business at akturner.com. And don't forget, if you liked what AK had to say about home exchanges, then I have partnered up with one of her most recommended resources. You have the ability to connect with over 50,000 members in 150 countries, the ability to list your home for free, and can get started with a completely free 14-day trial. Head on over to irelpodcast.com/exchange and get started with your free trial right now.
You have been listening to the IREL Podcast with Taylor White. Be sure to hit up irelpodcast.com for more. That's irelpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.